To address the ruling regarding Trump's immunity, the Special Counsel has revised the election indictment. In response to the Supreme Court's decision that granted former presidents broad immunity, Jack Smith filed a petition in the case that charges him with plotting to overturn the election that will take place in 2020. On Tuesday, federal prosecutors issued a revised version of an indictment that accused former President Donald J. Trump of plotting to overturn the 2020 election. In order to help the indictment survive the recent ruling by the Supreme Court that grants former presidents broad immunity for official acts while they were in office, some charges were removed from the indictment. Just a few days before the judge who was overseeing the case was supposed to receive their separate proposals for how to evaluate the impact that the Supreme Court's immunity decision will have on the case, the new indictment was handed down. The lawyers for Mr. Trump and the prosecutors working in the office of the Special Counsel, Jack Smith, were scheduled to present their proposals to the judge. At first glance, it was not immediately apparent how the new indictment would influence the way that evaluation will proceed from this point forward. Mr. Smith's deputies removed all of the allegations concerning Mr. Trump's attempts to strong-arm the Justice Department into supporting his false claims that the election had been rigged against him between the original 45-page indictment and the 36-page superseding indictment. This was perhaps the most significant change that occurred between the two indictments. The initial charging document accused Mr. Trump of conspiring with Jeffrey Clark, a loyalist within the Justice Department who had promised to launch investigations into election fraud despite the fact that other high-ranking officials within the department had warned him against doing so. In its decision regarding immunity, however, the Supreme Court came to the conclusion that Mr. Trump could not be held accountable for any of the criminal charges that were associated with any of his interactions with officials from the Justice Department. The court came to this conclusion because it determined that dealings with the department were an essential part of the president's official duties. In spite of this, a significant portion of the previous indictment was not altered in any way as Mr. Smith's team drafted the new one. Mr. Trump is accused of overlapping conspiracies to defraud the United States, to obstruct the certification of the election at the Capitol on January 6, 2021, and to deprive millions of Americans of their rights to have their votes counted. These 4 charges are the same as those that have been brought against him. In addition, several of the alleged plots that were included in the initial charging document were included in the revised indictment. Despite the fact that Mr. Trump is still being accused of working with his subordinates to create fake slates of electors, asserting that he won the election in several key swing states that were actually won by President Biden, the allegations continue to be prevalent. There are also charges that have not yet been brought against him in connection with his efforts to exert pressure on his vice president, Mike Pence, to throw the election in his favor during the certification proceeding that took place at the Capitol on January 6.